Welcome back everybody to my final episode on the story of King Otto the Great, Otto the First of the Holy Roman Empire, as told by Widukind of Corway in his works Deeds of the Saxons. For this one, we were talking in last video about the struggle between the Hungarians and how it culminated in the Battle of Lechfeld in 955. I mentioned last time that during the invasion of the Hungarians there were already rebellious barbarians in Saxony. So this is where we're gonna start off this episode today. In the year of 954, Duke Hermann of Saxony quells some rebellions, and the rebels Wichmann and Egbert ally with barbarian kings trying to overthrow the rule in Saxony. Wichmann is the nephew of the Duke of Saxony, and he's also the guy, if you remember from two videos ago, he's the guy that was leading the reinforcement troops from Saxony to Bavaria, trying to aid Otto when he was putting down a rebellion there. He was the guy leading those reinforcement troops and who switched sides to Liudolf and Conrad the Red, who were at that time trying to overthrow Otto as the king of the empire. So this guy again, is stirring up trouble here and trying to overthrow the rule in Saxony. Hermann, the Duke of Saxony, however, meets them at Sweetlescran Castle and beats them, killing many of these treacherous Saxons and looting their stuff. Still, during the Civil War, a peace deal with the barbarians is broken under dubious circumstances. Perhaps a setup by the Slavs, and a slaughter of Saxons follows. Now, finally having defeated the Hungarians, though, Otto moves to avenge the Saxons. His army is trapped at a riverside. The barbarians spot his army out and they surround him between the river, and they build up some barricades from trees that they cut down in the area. And then once in the morning Otto and his troops wake up, they find themselves surrounded by barbarian enemies. However, with Liudolf, his son, participating in the battle, Otto defeats the barbarian army under King Stoinev. And this barbarian tribe is punished severely. The king, Stoinev, is beheaded, and so are 700 prisoners that were taken at the battle. So this is some cruel action that Otto displays here, not usually in line with his more lenient nature. But this one, of course, the major difference is this is against barbarian and not against some of his own people that were simply trying to gain some more power or overthrow him. These are non-Christians, so this is why probably Otto feels free to display such a draconian measure. The treacherous Saxons Wichmann and Egbert escape though, and they seek refuge under Hugo of Francia, who is, if you remember, married to Otto's sister actually. So this is a bit of an awkward family situation once more. Hugo the Elder, the dad of Hugh Capet, is giving shelter now to these two highly treacherous Saxons who again trying to overthrow Otto in his own duchy. Now though we approach Otto's zenith. Otto becomes internationally feared and admired. Romans, Greeks, Saracens come to see him, and he receives presents such as spices, carpets, monkeys, lions and camels. And now think about being a citizen of Saxony at this point in time. You're living in the midst of Europe. A bunch of wars were just being fought, and you're living in an area that is still very much, ethnically uniform. And now all these kinds of people are introduced to you, giving visit to your king and bringing these very foreign spices, presents and even animals for you to see. This is probably a very unique feeling that the people at this time got, and this is probably what contributed to the identity of the Holy Roman Empire as such a powerful entity. The people really started feeling like they were probably some chosen people, or at the very least a very powerful people. Liudolf, the son of Otto, dies in 957 in Italy, which saddens Otto because, of course, at this point in time Liudolf had been reintroduced and also had fought alongside him against the barbarian tribes. Liudolf is buried in Mainz or Aschaffenburg, we're not too sure about that. and now only his son Otto remains, from the male heirs, that is. Egbert, who is one of the two treacherous Saxons with the barbarian affair that we just covered, is redeemed by Otto's brother Bishop Brune, who mediated a lot in all these affairs that Otto had to deal with, all these civil wars. His brother and the Archbishop Brune was somebody that always tried to mediate, tried to keep the bloodshed low, and he succeeded many times, such as this one where he redeems Egbert. Finally, Wichman swears under oath to quit being a traitor and is accepted back into Saxony. Otto's victories and overcoming of disease, remember he's getting up to a pretty old age for the time now, are attributed to divine intervention. He is regarded as this chosen by the Lord, savior of Central Europe, and he's really the one who stamps the identity onto this very young empire. Having settled affairs at home, Otto now finally is free to move to Italy once again. Widukind, the author, mentions but doesn't describe the campaign which saw 2 years of fighting against King Berengar of the Lombards in the year 964 and 2 victories against Rome, also defeating Greek, this being Byzantine, armies. As Otto is occupied in Italy, Wichman once more, despite having sworn under oath to be a good boy, tries to conspire with the Danes under Harold Bluetooth. He is found out and narrowly escapes capture in Saxony. At this point also, curiously, Bishop Poppa, who is just some bishop which we don't even know existed for sure, he moves to Denmark and converts Harold Bluetooth personally, and thereby over the years, the Danes to exclusive Christianity. This account by Widukind is contested among historians, as there are several other semi-legendary, just like this, accounts of the Danish conversion to exclusive Christianity. But this one, from my very limited studies, as I have to admit, into this topic, seems rather believable. Not in the exact way that it happened, but it would make sense for the time and how Widukind describes it to have been around this time where Bluetooth adopts Christianity. Now, it is described in Widukind's works that the Danes already were Christians in many regards, but the crucial distinction here is the word exclusive Christianity. The Danes usually just integrated the Christian God, the Christian beliefs, into their own pagan Germanic pantheon of gods. They didn't necessarily regard that as something, well, impossible like we nowadays feel about it, like when we hear about that kind of stuff. Back in the day, before Christianity, polytheism, remember, was not that uncommon. Many religions of the great people of the antiquity as well were polytheistic, so this isn't really something too shocking as compared to nowadays. But now, under Bishop Poppa, Harold Bluetooth is converted into Christianity, supposedly by walking over burning coal. Poppa proves his Lord, his God, as the true one, and this supposedly converts Harold Bluetooth. Though again, this account is very contested by other sources, and we cannot know for sure that it happened that way. Moving on though, Wichman has a final attempt at seizing power in Saxony. Margrave Gero finds Wichman guilty and hands him over to the barbarians with whom he formerly conspired. This might sound a little bit weird here, because if Wichman is guilty and still a conspirator, why is he simply, well, why isn't he just executed? But this is some sort of exile that is supposed to drive him away for good and give him a place where he belongs. And indeed, Wichman ends up leading successful campaigns for those barbarian tribes that he now joins against some other tribes. Margrave Gero himself beats the Lusiki Slavs in an immense struggle and completely subjugates them under great loss. So again, the Saxons push into that barbarian territory even further. But a Slavic uprising against their overlord, Duke Hermann of Saxony, is joined by his nephew Wichman, once more. So again, the Slavic tribes, this time joined by Wichman, try to take back some land from Saxony and rid themselves of that foreign rule. But again, they are defeated, and Wichman once more has to escape the battlefield. Finally, though, in 967 he is killed in a fight against another barbarian king who is loyal to Otto. So therefore, this last traitor, this last hurdle of Otto's is overcome, and this time around the inner affairs are finally settled. Moving on to an exterior affair, namely one with the Greeks. Because Otto had only one remaining son at this point, also named Otto, was supposed to be married to a Byzantine princess. But a trap by the Byzantines is set up and results in Otto's camp being raided. He's understandably pissed about this, so he sends an army out and catches that Greek detachment, killing many of them and sending the rest back home with noses cut off. Constantinople is therefore forced to pay tributes to the East Frankians. The Byzantine emperor is killed in 969, and one of his generals is instituted as the successor. His niece, Theophanu, ends up marrying Otto II, the son of Otto the Great, in Italy. Now finally, as a closing, Otto dies on May 7 in 973 and is buried in Magdeburg, having survived all his children barring Otto and his one remaining daughter. The formal election of the already co-king and co-emperor Otto II takes place. Now the emperor title is what I want to discuss a little bit to close this series out, because as you might have noticed, Widukind recounts all these events in Otto's reign, some of them with very great detail, but he noticeably leaves out all the details from Otto's Italian journeys. He doesn't mention at all that Otto got crowned emperor by the Pope, and the one occasion that Widukind recounts as Otto becoming emperor is not his journey to Italy, but his victory over the Hungarians at the Lechfeld in 955. Therefore, Widukind implies that the emperor title once more is not necessarily bound to the Pope. This German emperor title is more so given by the troops in the field after an extraordinary military achievement, as I've mentioned before in this series. And this is probably how most people at the time regarded the title. Imagine being a citizen of this land at the time. You're just some dude, let's imagine some peasant who has his own few animals maybe and a couple of fields. And now you have this very important, very powerful and very popular leader as your king. Well, the one thing you're gonna basically be proud of, or at least be invested in, is how that guy fares against your foreign enemies. So it makes sense thinking of Otto as a great king or even an emperor if he's effective in protecting you, protecting your people. And if he's a good battlefield commander, you're not necessarily gonna care all that much about what the Pope has to say about the whole thing. In fact, for most these Germanic people, it wasn't even important if Italy was part of the empire or not. Many would have simply preferred to just have their own states or simply be confined to their own duchies. They weren't that much, even though they were Christians, because they had been converted almost 200 years ago by Charlemagne by force, but they weren't all that much keen on what the Pope had to say about their affairs, and much less about who should be reigning your duchy or your kingdom or your empire. So it kind of makes sense for the people at the time to not really attribute this emperor title to what the Pope says, but more importantly to you yourself as a soldier in the field be able to recognize the greatness of your leader and then proclaim him as the emperor. With this thought, I want to leave you all at the end of this series. I hope you enjoyed it as nearly as much as I did. In any case, it was very much fun to produce this, and I will definitely post more history-related series on the channel. In fact, I'm already reading a new book, which I'm not going to tell you about just now, but definitely keep watching out on my channel for new uploads if you're at all history interested. But for now, I wish you a good rest of the summer. Take care of yourselves and see you next time.